This is a bar called Quindecim. Legend has it that only those who are dead can enter here. One day, a newlywed couple walked into the bar. They didn't know why they were there. They vaguely remembered they were on their honeymoon. However, when they tried to leave the bar, the bartender, Decim, told them that they could only leave after playing a life or death game. Takashi thought Decim was crazy, so he turned around with his wife and tried to leave. But no matter how long they searched, they couldn't find the exit. Takashi had no choice but to demand Decim to tell him where the exit was. Decim still told him that the game had to be completed before they could leave. Takashi was very stubborn. He didn't want to play any game. At that moment, a wall behind Decim opened, and it was filled with corpses. Seeing this, Takashi was scared. He had no choice but to agree to play the game. The game they chose was simple. Each of them had 7 darts. The dartboard had corresponding scores. If they hit the double score area, their score would double. But there was one more thing. Every area on the dartboard had an image of a human organ, and these organs were connected to nerves in the human body. The person who was hit wouldn't die, but would feel the corresponding pain. Takashi was a doctor. He scoffed at something without scientific basis. He gently comforted his wife. "Machiko, don't worry." But after Takashi threw his first dart, Machiko suddenly felt a sharp pain in her shoulder. Takashi immediately checked his wife, but he didn't find any wounds. His wife gently stroked his cheek and said that maybe it was just her illusion. But when Machiko threw her first dart, Takashi also felt a sharp pain. At this point, they had no choice but to believe what Decim said. But Takashi, as a doctor, still couldn't believe in something without scientific evidence. He thought this was all just a prank by Decim. Decim merely told him coldly, "This is a life or death game. The game will only end when all the darts are thrown." Then Decim told them, "If you truly love each other, just aim for the areas without images, and no one will get hurt." So the couple tried to deliberately avoid hitting the marked areas. Sure enough, they didn't get hurt. But at this moment, Takashi suddenly remembered the corpses hanging on the wall. He suddenly realized that if he lost, he might die right there. The fear of death made him waver. He pretended to lose control and threw a dart at a marked area. Machiko's body suddenly felt intense pain, but she didn't get angry, even though Takashi kept apologizing. Although Machiko said it's okay on the surface, when she threw the dart, she accidentally landed it on the eye pattern. Takashi clutched his eye, screaming in agony, but Machiko really hadn't meant it, because when she threw the dart, her body had an accident, causing the dart to go in the wrong direction. Seeing Takashi, who was lying on the ground in agony, Machiko wanted to explain, but Takashi didn't listen to her. He just picked up the dart from the floor. Machiko realized that Takashi was planning to take revenge on her. She begged Takashi, "Please, don't throw the dart at the image of the stomach, because I'm pregnant." The reason Machiko didn't tell him earlier was because she wanted to give him a surprise. This revelation made Takashi, who was consumed by anger, suddenly snap back to his senses, but he still threw the dart at the image of the stomach. In the next moment, Machiko screamed in pain while clutching her stomach. She asked Takashi why he did this. Takashi told her that he had overheard 2 of Machiko's friends talking about her affair, so he thought the child in her belly wasn't his. Takashi didn't even know why such memories suddenly appeared in his mind. Machiko wanted to explain, but Takashi didn't listen. At this moment, there was only 1 dart left. During the struggle between the couple, they accidentally threw the dart at the bull's eye. At that moment, Machiko's memory completely returned. She told Takashi that they were both already dead. Decim then revealed the true purpose of the game. It was to make both parties show the ugliest side of human nature, and in the end, he would decide who would go to heaven and who would go to hell. Upon hearing this, Takashi finally remembered everything. It turned out that after he overheard the news of his wife's affair, he began to distrust her. During their honeymoon trip, Machiko's phone rang, but she didn't answer it. Furious, Takashi tried to grab the phone to see who was calling, which led to the car accident. Takashi was devastated. He collapsed to his knees in front of Decim, begging for salvation, but Decim was just an adjudicator. Out of his mind, Takashi blamed his wife for everything. He accused her of shameful behavior. Looking at Takashi's madness, Machiko couldn't understand why he had changed so much. She turned her back to Takashi, admitted to her affair, and then she laughed, but her laughter was filled with sorrow. Angry, Takashi wanted to kill her, but he was restrained by Decim. Then Decim sent them both into two separate elevators. Takashi went to heaven, and Machiko went to hell. However, there were others observing this judgment. One of them was the manager, Nona, who was Decim's superior, and the other was Chiyuki, Nona's assistant. They were sitting in the room filled with corpses, watching everything unfold, but those so-called corpses were actually puppets. They were used by Decim to scare people. The memories of those who entered this bar were erased. They didn't know they were already dead, but as the game went on, their memories gradually returned. Chiyuki thought Decim's judgment was wrong. She believed that the child in Machiko's womb should have been Takashi's. Her final words were actually meant to save Takashi. However, Decim, as the adjudicator, had access to the memories of the deceased, so he is very certain that Machiko did indeed have an affair. As Decim was troubled, wondering if he had made a mistake, Nona told him that Takashi had never trusted his wife, and therefore, they could never be happy together. Also, Machiko had indeed had an affair, so there was no issue with the judgment. The elderly Masao held the cue stick and shakily aimed at the white ball. Kenji watched Masao confidently. Just as he believed the game was won, Masao suddenly potted a ball with a small intestine pattern. In the next moment, Kenji's stomach began to ache intensely. Before he could even react, Masao potted another ball. Kenji's vision started to blur, and he stared in terror at Masao's skillful pool shots. The next moment, Masao potted two balls at once. Kenji, in agony, clutched his mouth and ears, and approached the pool table. Kenji, with fear, looked at the ball with a heart design, clutching his chest. Masao, however, casually took a sip of his drink and said, "Every time I drink, I think of the dishes my wife used to make." He added, "I won't go easy on you in this match. I have to win and go home." With that, Masao focused entirely and took a shot. Kenji screamed in fear, shouting for the ball not to go into the pocket. Seeing the ball not sink into the pocket, Kenji collapsed on the floor, letting out a sigh of relief. During the break, Kenji drank some ice water to calm himself. At the same time, he recalled what Decim had said at the start of the game. If he lost this time, he would truly have no way out. Now, there were only two balls left on the pool table. One had a brain design, and the other had a heart design. Kenji decided to take a final desperate chance. Intending to strike the ball with the brain design, he quickly mapped out the white ball's path in his mind, and with a swing, he struck the white ball. The white ball successfully hit the designated ball along the planned route, but it didn't go into the pocket. To make matters worse, the white ball stopped at a perfect position. Terrified, Kenji begged Masao for another chance. Masao gave him a brief glance and said, "Losing the game doesn't necessarily mean you'll die." Hearing this, Kenji immediately asked Decim what would happen if he lost the game. Decim replied, "This is a life or death game. As for the rest, I am not obliged to tell you." Kenji felt it was unfair. Masao's skill was clearly on a whole different level from his, but Decim told him, survival itself is unfair. At that moment, Masao suddenly took a shot and potted two balls at the same time. Kenji, feeling the approach of death, was suddenly flooded with memories from the past. He remembered meeting a girl at a pool hall, falling in love with her at first sight. To win her over, Kenji started practicing pool relentlessly, but soon, Kenji began to fool around with other women. When his girlfriend found out, she immediately broke up with him. Despite this, Kenji still loved her deeply. At this point, Kenji, filled with rage, grabbed the cue stick and charged at Masao. Despite the large age gap between them, it was clear that Kenji was no match for Masao. It wasn't long before Kenji was knocked to the ground by Masao. At that moment, Masao's memories also began to resurface. A fighter jet zoomed past him, and he saw bombs being dropped on the land below. His mind began to flood with more memories. Masao remembered playing with paper airplanes as a child, bullying classmates as a rebellious teenager, becoming a pool champion as an adult, and eventually marrying his lover. Before he knew it, he had reached his old age. When Masao snapped back to reality, Kenji, holding a cue stick, charged at him again. Kenji then tackled Masao and slammed him into a fish tank behind them, and the fish tank shattered into pieces. Kenji was the first to regain his senses. Looking at Masao lying on the floor, he quickly rushed to check on him, only to find that Masao was already dead. At that moment, Kenji was filled with fear. He couldn't believe he had actually killed someone. In his panic, Decim reminded him that the game was not over yet. Only the person who potted the black ball would be able to leave. Decim told Kenji not to feel guilty, since the rules of the game didn't say that you couldn't hit your opponent. Kenji cursed Decim, calling him inhumane, but Decim calmly told him to pot the black ball. With no other choice, Kenji potted the 2 red balls and finally the black ball. He had won the game. Decim clapped to congratulate him. At that moment, Masao suddenly stood up. Surprising Kenji, Masao slowly walked toward Kenji and said that he didn't blame him. Instead, he was very thankful to Kenji. He recalled that, due to illness, he had been bedridden for so long, and was now happy to play pool one last time in his life. And at that moment, Kenji also remembered that, when his girlfriend found out about his affair, she directly stabbed him to death. Then Decim told Kenji that this game was just a process of deciding who would go to hell. Kenji asked him in horror, "Who'll go to hell?" Decim replied that he was not obliged to tell him. In his anger, Kenji charged at Decim, only to be restrained by countless threads that appeared behind him. He was then dragged toward the elevator for judgment. Seeing this, Masao walked up to Decim and whispered something, and what they said, no one knew. Afterward, Masao followed Kenji into the elevator for their judgment. As the elevator doors began to close, Masao's face twisted into a strange smile. This red-haired man is named Jinty. He is the adjudicator of the 20th floor bar. On that day, a man and a woman arrived at this bar at the same time. Harada is an idol singer, and Mayu is his fan. Both of them are dead and arrived here, having lost their memories of their past lives. So, Jinty set up a game for them, to determine whether they would go to heaven or hell. The floor was covered with squares in 4 colors, yellow, green, red, and blue. Next to Jinty was a strange spinning wheel. Wherever the wheel landed, they had to place the designated body part on the corresponding color square. If they lost balance, or touched a square of a different color, they would lose. Soon, the game began. Mayu placed her left hand on the blue square. Harada stepped with his right foot onto the yellow square. As the wheel spun several times, both of them placed different body parts on the squares. As the game progressed, the distance between them became smaller, and their poses grew increasingly awkward. But Jinty didn't want to make it that easy for them, so he pressed a button on the remote control in his hand. The next moment, they noticed strange patterns beginning to appear on the floor. Mayu, following Jinty's instructions, placed her hand on a red pattern. The ground started to heat up rapidly. Now, apart from the pattern they were touching, the rest of the floor felt as hot as lava. In a hurry, Harada touched the next pattern, and the burning sensation vanished. But what followed was a strong, cold wind. Just as they were enjoying the cool air, the wind suddenly intensified. Mayu immediately placed her foot on the next pattern. The temperature dropped sharply, and the ground began to freeze slowly. Mayu urged Harada to touch the next pattern quickly, but Harada's foot had already been frozen to the ground. With all his strength, Harada finally pulled his foot free. Then, he rushed to touch the yellow pattern. The next moment, the ice began to melt into rain, falling from above. The ground beneath them suddenly began to collapse. Only a few pillars remained as support for their footing. Beneath them were countless giant spikes. Jinty told them that if either of them fell, the game would immediately end. He then revealed an evil grin, because he believed they were about to reveal the ugliest side of human nature. In order to survive, Harada decided to kick Mayu off, but at that critical moment, Mayu suddenly needed to pee. She couldn't hold it any longer. Rather than wetting herself in front of her idol, she decided it would be better to jump. She then told Harada that she was willing to sacrifice her life for her beloved idol. Mayu's words deeply moved Harada. Just as she was about to fall, Harada grabbed her hand, but in the end, Mayu still fell. As she fell, she suddenly remembered how she had died. It turned out that she slipped on soap in the bathroom and died from the fall. When she hit the bottom, the spikes turned into soft balloons. Quickly, Mayu was dressed in new clothes, and appeared once again in front of Harada. Seeing this, Harada unconsciously walked towards her, because Mayu now looked youthful and cute, exactly the way Harada liked.